Hello, this is Jan from Red Toad Art Studio. Today we're going to learn a couple of new techniques as we watercolor. So, we're going to do this cute little silhouette of a kitty cat chasing bubbles. So we are going to learn how to make bubbles and also how to use some stencils with our watercolor work. And this is a really fun picture. Now it does take a little time because we have to let things dry between some of these stages, but it's not hard. You will need several things. You'll need some watercolor paper, the usual things of a pencil, eraser, and permanent markers, and I just use black Sharpies for this. You will also need a green permanent marker and kind of a pinky red permanent marker. And I am again using Sharpies, the ultra fine point Sharpies for that. Now this is something you might not have on hand and you might have to go to the store and find it. We are going to be using stencils, and for the bubbles we are going to use a stencil that has circles in it. Now, I found these at my local Walmart. You can also find these at your craft store, and a lot of your office stores will have something that have circles in it. Now, if you can't do any of those and can't get a hold of them, one other thing you can do, if you have circle punches, you can find some of that plastic packaging off of things that you buy and punch holes in that and make your own stencil. You might think about getting a brick pattern one. I didn't use it in this one, but I think I will on my next one. So it looks like there's a little bit of flooring tiles down here. Another one I really like is this kind of a petaled stencil. Now, they may be different now. Just look through the stencils. Walmart has a great little selection of stencils for a very inexpensive price. And you can do this without stencils at all, except for that circle one, and that you will need for this technique. You'll need your paint brushes. The background is done in a wet on wet technique, so you need one that's a little larger so that you can get a lot of water on quickly, and then your smaller one to paint with. You will need your water to activate your colors, and water to clean your brush with, and clean water especially to put on your paper to wet it. You'll need a paper towel or an old rag and your paints. Use whatever set of paints you have. Any set should work just fine for this technique. And did I mention tape? Because when we want to start our painting, we'll need to tape our picture down, and something that you can tape it to, like a clipboard or a craft mat. That's about it. I may have forgotten something, but we'll talk about it as it comes up. So, let's get started. We're going to draw our cat first, and we want him to take up about a third of our piece of paper. And today I'm using approximately 6 inches by 10 inches. Now you can do this any size that you want. Alright, now just follow me step by step here. It is not hard to draw this cat. We are going to do a raindrop or teardrop shape from the top, and it comes out here to the side like that. A teardrop, a raindrop. Now, off of this point, we are going to come off the side. When we get down here, we're going to draw a little paw. There's his paw. Now, draw lightly so these lines don't show through when you paint it. I want to draw dark enough that you can see it. We're going to draw a circle for the kitty cat's head. We're not worried a lot about anatomy here, because with the silhouette, those are very forgiving. There is our circle for the head. Now we're going to smooth this out a little bit and add a neck to the kitty cat. Just like that. Okay? Now, it's up to you which direction kitty cat's looking, whether he's going straight forward or he's looking up. If he's chasing bubbles, he's probably looking up. So let's add a little muzzle about this area so his eyes would be here looking up. So here's a little muzzle. And then the ears will be kind of tipped back since he is looking up. There we go, some ears. And we need to add a tail, of course. Now the tail, the center of the cat's kind of like running along here because he's looking that way at something. So the tail originates in this area. So don't come out over here. Come out here at the bottom. And let's give him a tail. Now my kitty cat in this picture is coming out a little bit bigger than the one I showed you in the beginning. But you know, every one of these tends to have their own characteristics and come out in their own ways. There we go. And you'll want some kitty cat whiskers, of course, coming out like that. I think he is cute as can be already. Okay, now we will be having a border around here, so when we add some of these other things like these vines, we need to account for that. We'll have bubbles coming up here, and just a little bit of vines coming up here. So let's decide where our floor is. Our floor would be right about here. Now don't make a solid line here, just a line that kind of suggests there's a floor there, just like that. Now you could just do this picture and just have the kitty cat and the bubbles. That would be fine. Now I like having a little bit of flowers here, like he's sitting on the floor in the house and there's a pot of flowers. So I am going to draw a pot here to hold some flowers, and it's like the bottom half of a circle. If you want to go ahead in the pencil and finish that circle out, go ahead. Just don't ink the part that's where your border will be. And then I'm going to put a little fancy leg on this. Just like that. And then cut off the top of that circle like this. And we'll have some vines coming out of that. Now that vine, if you look at it, it looks complicated, but it's super easy, and I'll show you step by step how to do that vine. So let's just draw some of the main branches through here. And do this just kind of randomly. Don't get all uptight about the vine. Have some disappear off the side. Have a couple branches even meet the kitty and maybe come out this other side like that. And just enjoy this. Don't get uptight. This is easy because we're going to randomly put in our bubbles too. So we're not going to get all uptight about perfection. Now I'm going to erase that little bit of floor there. Now, our next step will be making our cat black. And we're doing that before we paint it. So I'm going to erase any lines here that I really don't want. One thing about Sharpies, you can watercolor right over the top of your Sharpie. And it won't smear. So let's get rid of our extra lines. We actually might want a couple of highlight lines in there though. Let's think about that. How about a little highlight where a collar is sitting on our cat? We don't have that in our picture I just showed you. But let's put a little collar here. I had trouble saying that word. So let's have a little white line here. And the only way to keep a white line on that is to not paint it or not use Sharpies on it. So we're going to mark the white line. Let's have a little white line here. like this. Maybe coming up a little farther. Let's try it that way. We can always fill it back in if we don't like it. So I like to come along and do the small parts of the cat with my ultra fine point Sharpie. And even ink it in before you fill it in. So that gives you a good view of what your kitty cat's looking like. Remember, silhouettes don't show a lot of detail. It may show some highlights, which really help a silhouette out, but not very many. That's what our little white spots were for. And remember, when you're inking, turn your paper so that you're drawing from a good angle. There we go. Then that will remind me to leave those highlights. And if we don't like those highlights, we will take them out. So now back to filling in. I like to fill in like the ears and the tail with this small Sharpie. And obviously we want to put in the whiskers with that one. And then once we've done that, you can continue filling with that smaller tipped Sharpie, but it will take a while. I like to go to the bigger one, which is just a fine point, and then fill in the rest with that one because it will go much quicker. So I'm going to finish doing this, and then I will be back with you in just a few minutes. Okay, I'm finishing up my first go with my black pen, which is going around the edges with my ultra fine marker. And I did do something else here. I don't know if I'll leave it or not, but if you can look, I left a little white spot up where the eye would be, just for that glint that you see in the eyes of people and animals. I may leave it or I may not. I want to see what that looks like, but you could experiment with that too. So my next step would be to take my fine point Sharpie here with the bigger tip and go in and finish filling this in. And this will go so much faster than if we use that ultra fine point. And see if I can not go over the glint in my kitty's eye. Now, I accidentally left a little spot there. I may leave that for now and see if I like it there. Alright, finishing up my kitty cat. Now, there's a few differences here that I really kind of like between this one I did earlier and this one. Oh, we need to add the paw over here, don't we? We didn't draw a paw in for him to bat bubbles with. Well, we will do that next. I left highlights this time. And I really kind of like those highlights in there. Now, you can do it either way. You can go solid black, which a lot of silhouettes are, or you can just add a few little highlights to make more detail. Now let's draw that paw in there. Let's get your pencil back out. And about here, because his leg would come down a little bit and then go up. And let's just put a paw where he is batting on the bubbles. There's his paw. So we might want to add a little highlight line through there. Let's see how that works. Now we do need to just fill this in with our black. There we are. Now, while we've got this pen out, let's go down and make our flower pot black. Now, don't fill in this top area where the plants are going to grow out. You can. It's not a tragedy if you do. But let's not do that at this point. Now, I'm trying to notice where my white border will come in here. So I'm just going to kind of come down straight here. If we need to fill it in with some black later, we can. Now, it's good to get brave sometimes and just draw with your pen or your paint without having a pencil drawing under it. And some of that we will be doing with the leaves of our vine and placing our bubbles. We aren't going to have pencil showing us where to go. We're going to get braver and put down things like pen marks that aren't erasable. But there comes a point where we need to learn to do that without being really scared to do it. I understand the fear. And sometimes, if there's a picture you like, you may want to do it 2 or 3 times and learn on the first one what works and what doesn't. Maybe be learning on the second one. And the more you make of it, the better that picture will get. We'll put a little rim here. And the other thing I'm going to do right now is just mark in the little black lines we had for our floor. Just like that. And I think that's all we need to do for this stage. Our next stage is watercoloring the background. Now, our vines and things we will do on top of our watercolor. So let's put away our black inks and let's get our paint out. You will need to activate 3 colors at least. Now I have 3 on mine. I have a yellow, a pinky color, and a blue or a turquoisey color. And it depends on what paint set you're using, what you'll have. But anything you have as a pastel. And you know, to make these colors pastel, you need to dilute them with water. So find your palette where you can dilute paints and get those ready. Get 3 colors ready. Now, I did my example kitty cat yesterday. So I have some colors already set up that I just need to add water back to. So I'm adding some water to my yellow back here, to my pink. Now for you, you will need to put the water down and then dip into your pans of color and add some to your puddle. But I already have color in mine. And this is a small picture, so it doesn't take much paint. Now I do need to take a brush and stir these colors up. Get them all wet and diluted here. I actually like to use a stencil brush to do this because it's a little heavier brush and it stirs the paint well. But we do need to test these out on a scrap piece of paper. We want to see if this is the color we want. And I like that yellow. It's a very pale yellow. Now, if I want it to be darker, I just need to dilute my yellow from my pan and bring it over and add to it. But I think this yellow is just fine. So before I stir another paint, clean your brush. Because we want to keep our water as clean as possible for doing our wet on wet. You might want to have 2 containers of water. 1 container for cleaning your brush and 1 for your clean water. Now I want to stir up my pink. I don't have much, but it doesn't take much to do this picture if you do a smaller sheet. So let's see what this one looks like. A very pale pink. but you know, it will do. This is supposed to be a pastel background. So I'm going to clean my brush. I like to clean my brush by wiping it on my paper towel before I dip it in the water. And that keeps my water cleaner. Now I am going to mix up this turquoise. This is a blue and a green mixed together. My set doesn't have a ready-made turquoise in it, but it's easy to make your own turquoise. Experiment with your blues and your greens, and you can get all different kinds of beautiful turquoises made. And that will do just fine. They're all very pastel-y, which is what I want, pastel colors. Because the cat is the subject of this little show here. Now, you'll want to look at your picture and decide what areas you want what color. Now, I want blue at the bottom because this time I'm going to stamp some brick. And then you can vary as you want. I know I want the pinks. I just like to do them in kind of stripes. So I think most of it, I will do blue here, a little yellow through here, then pink, blue, and yellow up there. So let's start out by taping our piece of paper down, where we've got our paints all mixed. So now we need to tape. There we have our picture all taped down. Now you need to get your clean water and your big fat brush. And we want to wet all of this picture. You don't have to worry about getting the middle of the cat wet, but very close around the cat. And it depends on whether you want these reflections to be colored, the background color or not. So just go around the cat unless you want this to be, say, a yellow or one of your colors. And you can always decide that later. Go right over your drawings of your vines. It won't hurt a thing. Those will still be showing when we're done painting, especially if you use very pastel colors. Now you see I went over my cat. And if you have a lot of lines showing, quickly erase these before you do this stage, because they will be under the watercolor later, and it's hard to erase them once they're under the watercolor. And I forget to tell you these things, and I had some lines there I should have gotten rid of, but you know, I don't think it's going to be any big deal. Be sure this is kind of soaked in, and you'll probably have to re-wet certain areas as you come to them, because you want this to be nice and wet for the wet-on-wet technique. Okay, in fact, I'm going to use this brush now to put in my colors. So let me get my colors back here. They don't want to fit well there. I'll just have to hold it here. I'm going to do my yellow first. So I'm going to do yellow through here, and I'm just going to dab paint in. We're going to let the paint kind of do its own thing. It's what's so neat, wet on wet. We let the paint kind of decide what we do, or what it does. Watercolor likes to do its own thing, and that's kind of what's so special about watercolor. Now, be sure you're close enough to your objects. Just kind of dab it in there, but you don't want to get things colored that you don't want colored. All right, and do I want yellow anywhere else? I'm going to put just a little line of yellow up in here. Now, your paper will start to buckle. Just expect that, unless you have great 300-pound paper, which most of us won't be using. I have some wonderful paper, but it is much harder to get a hold of. Now, if you have some, go ahead, but you'll have to get that at a craft store or order it. But Walmart will carry this 140-pound paper, which will do just fine, and that's what I am using here. Now, before I put another color on, I need to clean my brush. I'm going to bring my water over. Now, I'm going to put blue down here, so I'm going to re-wet it a little bit, just to be sure it's still wet. I should say turquoise. I'm going to put turquoise down here. Now, every one of these you do will come out just a little different because you're letting your watercolors do part of the work. And hey, always that what will work, let it work. I kind of want some blue to come up here for me to put a bubble in. And then we've got pink yet to do. I'm going to just do a little strand of blue up in here, and the rest will be the pinky color. You do this however you want to. It will be beautiful when it dries, however you do this. I love this wet on wet method. Alrighty. Clean your brush and we will add some pink. Now be sure that this is nice and wet or you'll get some hard lines in here. And we don't want hard lines for this technique. We want it to be nice and wet and blended together. Now let's add pink to this. You could also use a very light violet will work. Those are pretty. There we go. I'm going to add a little pink down here. Don't worry if your colors mix. If your blue and yellow mix, you'll just come up with kind of a green. Now, depending on the pink you've got and what set you've got, you might want to see what mixing with pink will do, but so far with mine, they have done just fine. Now, if you have a lot of puddles forming, you might want to just kind of wick some of them up with your brush. Now, this is a stage also where you've got to let this dry before you do the next step. And I like to put mine in front of a little fan that I keep on my desk, or if you have a heat gun. But I would not advise that if you're using Crayola. Crayola seems to burn instead of dry well. But with other brands of paint, you can use your heat gun. So, must dry. Now, I notice I got some pink on my highlight. I can clean that up just by kind of wicking up the dampness there. All right. So, I'm going to get a fan on this, and I will be back with you as soon as this has dried. Oh, but before I forget it, keep these colors that you've been using. This is what you will use with your stencils. So just keep these colors handy for when your picture is dried. Oh, before you go, I do need to say, we don't want this super dry. We want the puddles gone. But we need the paper to be slightly damp. Now, this will probably work if you forget to check it and it's very dry, but it will work a little better if it's not totally dry. What we want to do now is lift some of our paint. So we will need our water bottle, and we will need like our paper towel or clean rag that we can dip into our water. We will need our stencil, and we're going to lay our stencil over our picture where we would like some bubbles to show. And I think about like that for mine. I need to dampen my paper towel. Not wet, not drippy, just damp, just a little dampy. Come along and gently rub in the center of that circle, and it will lift your paint. Now, the longer your paint has dried, the more you may have to put some pressure on there. Don't put a lot of water on this paper towel, though, because it will run into your paint underneath the stencil, and that won't look the way you want it to look. Now, I want to keep a few of these little ones, but maybe that one right there. Now, let's carefully lift this and see what we have. There's the outline of our bubbles. Now, I want a little bubble down here, maybe one of these medium bubbles right here. I don't have a dark color there like I intended to for that bubble to show, but that's all right. It's there. I might have to outline it a little bit with a colored pencil or something. And let's put another couple bubbles up in here. Be sure your paper towel or whatever you're using does not have the paint. Dip it back in, get some clean water, squeeze that water out, make it very damp but not wet, and come up here and we'll get rid of blue. It's not going to be perfectly white, and you'll have some of your paper shedding here. So you don't want to rub too long on it. Let's see. Let's keep this bubble here. Now, I'm going to just take a brush and brush off the crumbs from that. All right, do we want some darker bubbles? Well, I tell you what we need to do is get our paint back out. Now, I need my smaller paintbrush. We want to paint some little highlights on each one of our bubbles. Do you notice how we had highlights right here? I don't know if you can see that. There's one right here. And up here, this is an example of where I got too much water on my paper towel when I tried to make my bubble. And see, it makes a mess. So that's fair warning to always keep it just barely damp. And here's some of our highlights. So, I will need to use a little pink on this one. So I'm going to get some pink on my smaller brush. And just do like a backwards C there as a highlight in that bubble. And I'm thinking, since my colors were so pastel on here, I might have to take a colored pencil and draw around the edges of these bubbles a little bit. Now let's see. I want to highlight this little pink one here. And the blue, I want to get some blue out. So I need to clean my brush for that. These always look better once they have dried. I see a pink one I missed there. Go back and get my pink. Now, I'd like to just put 2 or 3 bubbles in that look like they're in the distance. So I'm going to paint some bubbles in, believe it or not. So I'm going to come, like right in this section. See these two? We have pink and we have yellow. I'm going to paint a pink bubble in right here. The whole thing. It will be a darker bubble, and again, don't have much paint on your brush or it will go under your stencil and you won't like that. Now my other bubble is on the yellow, so I'm going to go in and get yellow, make my brush just damp, and make a yellow bubble. I didn't have much paint on that, did I? Again, we don't want much. These are just kind of subtly there in the background. Now you can do as many of these as you want, but I think I have enough on there. Now we need to just get our paintbrush clean and damp, and we're going to just lift paint for the highlight here. See how I made a white spot there? You can't even really tell on this yellow one, but that's fine. All right. When this is dried, I think we might see what it looks like to come in with colored pencils and just give it a little faint outline. But we'll wait till it dries to see. Well, here's one I did that needs a little highlight. There we go. And I have a highlight here that didn't belong here. It just dripped. Now this one is a little dark for my taste, so I'm going to lift. Get rid of some of that. There we go. And then this one didn't belong here at all. There we go. All right, now these do need to dry before we can add our markers on top. So if there's any fixing you need to do here, I think we just need to let this dry probably a couple hours. Now what I did before was probably only about 15 minutes, maybe even 10. I just wanted to get rid of the main puddles in the drying time. Now I have a little bit of pinky that has gone over on my silhouette that I want to get rid of. And again, remember, you can lift colors. Just don't have enough water that goes over into your background. I'm just cleaning up some that went over the edges. Now this, I say, probably needs a couple hours. So I will be back with you, and we will add the vines in here and perhaps a little outlining on our bubbles, because I think I'm a little more pastel in this picture than I was in this one. So we will see what it looks like when it dries. Okay, while that is drying, we could add our blue little bricks down here. So if you have a brick stencil or any other design will do, get your stencil, and it doesn't have to be bricks. It can be anything you want here. And if you have an edge where you can tape down, that does help a little bit. Just a little bit of holding that steady. And you'll want to use the same blue you used for this. And just have your brush lightly damp into your blue, and very lightly. Can you see it down here in the corner? We are going to go over the openings in our stencil. And again, don't have too much on your brush or it will go under the edges of your stencil. And that just ends up looking kind of messy. Now carefully, when you have that stencil done, lift it up and try not to touch back down. And if you have any dark spots, this is the point now to kind of smooth them out. Now we need to wipe our stencil off in case we have paint on it. And put it back down to finish our floor. See how that looks? Doesn't that look neat? So try to line your stencil up with the pattern you just did, so it looks right, just like that. And so I'm going to finish this flooring out. Now we're not worried about having these exact. They just need to be subtle. Whoops. I know I have a tendency to get in a hurry, and you don't want to do that, because if you get too much paint here, luckily you can kind of lift it, but you'll never get it as sharp as what you wanted to begin with. Like, I am not totally happy with my bubbles this time. I say things tend to come out different every time you do them. But I think with a little bit of colored pencil, we can bring that out. We could even circle the bubbles with our permanent markers. like a blue permanent marker. All right. Let's gently pull our stencil up. Yeah, I like that there. So this area of our picture will be covered in vines. And we are going to probably bring out our bubbles a little more after this dries. So now it really is the time to let this dry well so that we can draw over it with our pens and maybe our pencils. So I'll be back with you actually in a few seconds. For me, it'll be a couple hours. I am back with the fan on this picture. It dried very quickly. Now this is not totally dry, and it won't hurt if you wait a little bit longer than I did. But I've experimented, and I think I can bring out my bubbles a little more with some colored pencils. Now I'm going to use the color on it that it sits on, like this pink one. I found a colored pencil that matches it, so I'm going to give a little more depth to the outline of my bubble, just so it shows a little better. Now, any brand of colored pencil should work for this. And if you can't afford an expensive set, go get a set of Crayolas. They have sets with like 100 or 100 and more colors in them, and they will work just fine for this kind of thing. Now, see how much better my bubble is standing out? I could even shadow it a little bit if I wanted to, but I think this will just bring my bubble out a little bit more. Now this one is a mixture of pink and yellow. I think I'll just do it all pink. You may not need to do this. I didn't need to do this on my other picture because my pastels weren't quite as pastel-y. And you could probably also do this with markers, but it will not be as subtle with markers. Here's some pink ones up here I need to do. Never give up on a picture. Even if what you try to fix it with doesn't work, you will have learned something. And everything you learn you can take on to your next picture and do better and better. This yellow one here, I'm not sure. Let's do this in blue, because it's a mixture of yellow and blue there. Now the thing I find hard on this is to do a perfect circle. There we go. Now I'm going to outline these blue ones. And then the next thing we will do is make our vine. There's a pink one I missed right there. And you might be able to do them all in blue. It would probably work just fine. There, I think my bubbles are much better now. Now, you need to take your green pencil and you're going to draw in the vines. In fact, I think I'm dry enough to go ahead and take my picture up. I find it's hard for me to go crooked, so I'm going to untape my picture. Now remember, when you untape a picture, pull away from the center. It's not near as apt to tear your paper if you do it that way. And take your time pulling your tape off. Don't just rip it off. Pull it off. And we are about done. Now it takes a little bit of time to do these leaves, but it's not hard. There we go. Now, I can kind of turn my paper as I draw, so it's easy on my hand and wrist. going to add some more here going this way. I love doing these little curly cues. And just fatten that curly cue up a little bit. Like it's a combination vine and leaf maybe. And I'm going to fatten these things up in the bottom of our, well, there where it goes into the pot. We'll make that look like that was a curly cue. How's that? I like that. Now the leaves. Let's just start up here in a bare spot. And let me show you. Don't worry about doing leaves perfect. Just do kind of a leafy squiggle and then fill it in. And then you're going to go up and do one a little farther up on the other side. And just go back and forth and say, the leaves, if you look at leaves and just look at the shape, they're not always turned perfectly facing you. They are usually a little bit, well, odd shaped, randomly shaped. And so you don't have to draw perfect leaves at all. In fact, it is more lifelike if you just do some leafy squiggles and then fill that squiggle in. Try to stay about the same size for them, but same shape. You definitely don't have to do that. That's true for most botanicals you try. We tend to, early in our art career, to have all flowers and leaves facing us perfectly shaped. But that's not how they sit on the vine or the bush or the stem. They will have different shapes if we look at their outline. But see how easy this is to do a pretty vine? Now I'm going to do this one at the top. Just like that. See how quickly we made that vine? So let's go on up and add leaves to the rest of our vines here. I can't believe how quickly we've been able to do this picture today. I hope you're enjoying it. And you know you can change this around any way you want. Instead of bubbles, you could draw some butterflies at the kitty's batting. Or Christmas decorations, since it's coming up on Christmas. You could do a background of Christmas colors and have the kitty playing with Christmas decorations. That would be neat. There's so many things you can do with silhouettes that are fun. Use your imagination. There we go. We've got all of that already. Now we're going to come down here and add these leaves. There, finished my leaves up. Now let's add some pretty little flowers. I am using, I don't know what color this is. The Sharpies don't mark them on their pens themselves, but it's kind of a pinky red. You could use any color you want that will show up against your background. Now it's very simple. Let me show you on a stray piece of paper. We're doing on a small scale. We're doing a petal, and then a petal. It's like a propeller of a plane. And then 2 petals in between each one of those. Just like that. Only we're not doing quite this big. And then we're taking our black Sharpie and putting a center in. Just like that. For some cute little flowers. So let's come along and just add a few flowers here. And make them fairly small. And don't get too worried about having them perfect. See that cute little flower there? You will have learned several techniques with this picture. Lines, flowers, bubbles, and stencils. Okay, let's add our black centers, and then we will be done. We'll need to sign and date our picture. And down here in the corner, I'm going to sign it and date it. There we go. There is our cute little kitty cat having a lot of fun with our bubbles. And I hope you can make out the bubbles. I don't think they're showing quite as well on the camera as I see them on my piece of paper, but you will see them on your picture. So, I hope you're having a wonderful time, and I hope you have a lot of fun doing some silhouette work and some bubble work. And I will be seeing you in our next video, so bye-bye for now.